In this project, there are 12 different versions of people connecting into their abundance, and they do it in lots of different ways. The way we're telling this story around our abundance and the abundance of our identity and the reality of our identity is it's helping to lay a path forward for our people, because it's shifting some of the narratives that we're telling ourselves. This pathway, I think I'm hoping, or I'm aspiring to, is that it really widens us up to think about who we truly are and what we truly have access to. First, there's Rongowhakaata, but our Rongowhakaata-tanga then opens us up to so many possibilities about who and what we are and what we can do. We have to understand the beauty in our stories and in our narratives, and we have to tell them out to the world, because the world is thirsty, it's hungry.
In this side of the waiata, the tuauri, the composition of it and the setting of it and the framework of it was made to allow an opportunity for a child to learn. But we've got to go back a wee bit further, that particular composer had a whakapapa spread that went all the way down into the South Island. And so he was able to connect to a whole lot of other genealogical traits and pull them all together and put this thing together into something that could be played with a child. And we've got to remember that you can play with this thing. It's not so delved in tatu that you can't use it because you're talking with a child here. So what it gives you is a format to use as a springboard to go and get stuff over here and over here. And that's now on a global package where you can get stuff anywhere in the world. An example of that is Te Koti, the brilliance of that man. And the other example of excellence is obviously Raharui Rukupo and Te Waka Pirohuka. The ability to take, which is a Pākehā tool, a chisel, and carve a Māori tipuna and revolutionise something at a time where there was total change happening around them was a stroke of brilliance. The flip side of the Te Koti side of that coin is if you flipped it up, It's got two heads on it. The other head is Te Kote. Somewhere in there, his teachings are very, very similar to Rukupo, because what he did with the painted images was exactly the same. I'm going to take this and I'm going to do this. And both of those two men are genius. They come from a genius pool, and that has to be Rongowhakaata. If we were to use that word abundance, what abundance are we talking about there? The analogy is of a whale. Hei mai is actually the manner in how it comes ashore. And sometimes when they come ashore, if they've been at sea for a long time, they deglove. It's almost as though their whole body system is taken off and only the bones are left. And you've got to work out, how does that fit into my history with this pakake that ia mai kiuta? Then you've got to look at it and say, there's a wealth of knowledge in here. That's the abundance of knowledge, because the whale is the greatest carrier of history, whether it's coming from the warmer waters of Hawaii down to Tahiti, from Tahiti to Roroponga and past us through to Kaikoura. That whole trek is well documented, and the ability to be able to tap into Pawpaw and then go, oh, hang on, Pawpaw said this. And so you get on the back of something like a wave, and you ride it and see how far that wave can take you. And you know that this particular wave, it has the ability to wreck us as a people. But we're still here because we have to get on with it. And that's how they lived their lives. They took the dawn of change as a means of following that horizon as far as you can. So the Āmai Te Pakake is more not necessarily just about what it offers us in terms of its physical being as food, weaponry and wholesale, but its ability to have a mauri and a life force that's way beyond anything that we can have, because we're just small creatures here. There's the big tuakana coming ashore to bring that food and bring that type of korero ashore for us to say, actually, if you turn me around and push me back that way, I'll take you on a journey back out into that world, which is a different world from what we know, because it would be landlocked. We're tangata whenua, we're landlocked, we're no longer tangata moana. So it's that, and if you're tangata moana, surely you're tangata whetū. Tini whetū ki te rangi, and it's all that type of, take one word and have a look at it and see what it can do for you in a modern sense, and also how it's been interpreted from a traditional sense. But it's continuum of wave. I think that's what they were saying.
I moved over to Australia in 2007. My parents were already living over there. My sister and my grandfather was living over there, and for someone like me who was raised in Manutuki around my grandparents, that connection was really, really important to me. My kids were growing up, and yes, they had all of their cousins and their other nannies in Manutuki, but they didn't have their grandparents or their great-grandfather. But when he passed away, I felt like I no longer needed to be in Australia. We brought him home, and once we brought him home, I kind of felt like I didn't even want to leave. I miss cousins coming over for cup of teas. I miss that sort of thing that you can only get living out the country. So I had started making arrangements to come over for a working holiday. I had already made a decision in my mind that I was going to do a big travel around Aotearoa from the bottom of the south and get all the way to the top of the north. Well, I went as far as Bluff and then made my way to Te Rerenga Wairua, and by then I was broke. I was down to my last $20 and I had to make a decision. Well, All I know is if you're broke, you go home. So I had to come back to Gizzy. And then this opportunity to work for the Uri come up. So we get to come, this is our office, this is our working environment, and it kind of doesn't get any better than this. So Ngā Uri o Te Kōti, they started their treaty claims 22 years ago, and I was the youngest trustee of the claim, sitting amongst all my aunties and uncles. Once we have finished our claims, this was part of what they got returned to them as a result of all the grievances and loss. Our ultimate plan is to be able to tell the story of Te Kōti through the trees. So we want to be able to get seeds from Whareongonga, get some seeds from Ngā Tapa, and be able to tell his story in a not so pōti way. So we can use the trees to show the beauty of a bad experience that happened to our people, and that's exciting for me.
I was in Manutika during the 40s and 50s, and that was a sort of transition from primarily a Maori way of life to becoming more Pākehā-fied. And so my grandparents were sort of in between, helping me to transition from that life to what they saw was more Pākehā-fied. What impressed me during that time was a very different cultural attitudes compared with what exists now. Very simple, a lot of integrity, a lot of authenticity about themselves. And that was something that I inherited as a base to start with. And that was an amazing time, that bit of childhood. And then I realized, but I'd have to put that aside. Now, if we're talking about abundance, there's the abundance of the original culture that I inherited. And that was an abundance more spiritual rather than material. That has been with me ever since. And it's sort of emerged as I got into my 40s. And I realized that I needed to cultivate that more than the Pākehā side, because that provided material benefits, but not much in the way of spiritual benefits. And that was very, very stimulating, very, very good for my own stability, because I found being in the Pākehā environment tended to be disruptive of my whole self, if you know what I mean, because the focus is largely on material things, or material benefits. And there was nothing there that was a core, the core of yourself. So I had to look back to the original culture, because it's a tragic waste of life if you come here and you don't know what the hell you're doing here. You just copy everybody else. That's not really the way you're meant to live. You're supposed to find your own individual genius, I call it that. And that is what is good for society once you start manifesting it.
te kukune tanga mai, Hawaii ko te ahuai a ko mau I whare ki no tāno hoia pani kakawea ki te wai o mona hariki.
My name is Patrice Tipoki-Arkins. I live here in Australia with my family, and I moved over here with my parents back when I was a toddler. My parents performed and were entertainers, and so we travelled around with them, me and my siblings. We'd go to all different towns and we'd watch them singing and dancing and making music and uplifting people and telling stories. And then as I've grown up, this is what I've continued to do in my life. So I'm a performer, I'm an actor, I'm an entertainer in my own right, and have built a career doing musicals and singing and teaching and telling stories. Now I am a mum and have 4 children of my own, and it's really interesting watching them taking the reins and starting to test their skills and starting to tell their own stories, and that excites me that they love music and that they love doing what we've always done. Music can be involved in the arts, I find, really fulfills the soul. But there's something that I find that connects us. No matter where you're from, you can all hear a piece of music and be moved. Or, you can look at a painting or a creation and learn something. And I love that you can be lifted to a higher realm through the arts that you may not always be able to access through everyday happenings. Then sings my soul, my Savior unto me. I feel great strength knowing where I come from, and I know that I could always learn more about my heritage, and being able to share the little that I do know with others is exciting for me, and I feel like the world is starting to be more open to that as well, and to not expect things to be just one certain way, especially in a commercial realm. When I was involved in The Lion King, that show had such heart, and the music and the story and the mana in that show had stayed with me and was so moving at the time when I was doing it as well. I love being involved in projects that have that depth of being able to include people's heritage and background as well. There's so many stories that need to be told and that we want to know about, and so you can teach us what it's like to live in Manatuke, or what it's like to swim in the Wairua. There's so much that we can learn from each other, and there's so much adventure to be had while we're doing it.
I am the mukapuna of Mātini Pohatu and Wharenaya Swan. I always say that I was fortunate to be raised by both Mātini and Wharenaya. I think it's always a blessing to be able to have your nannies around you who influence the way that you are and the way that you think. Their influence in my life shows now as an adult the benefits of having a home that was rich in kai, rich in love, but we were pohara. Not that I ever knew that. Nothing ever went to waste. Everything, if it couldn't have been cooked, it was preserved or stored away. And there was an abundance. We've forgotten to use those skills that we once had or once practiced. So working in the taiao, being out there and seeing nature, being with nature, makes me realise actually as a human in the time frame that we're here, that our time frame is small. So what we do here is important. The marks that we leave or the paths that we lay while we're here for the time that we're here or for the next generation is really important, and that making sure that there's some value in the marks that you leave behind. I believe the knowledge that I've gained over these years doesn't belong to me. It was something that I've learnt along the way, but it's there to be shared. So I think I have one of the most fortunate jobs that anybody can have. Today I had Gisborne Intermedia. So today I talked with the kids and explained to the kids that every tree has a whakapapa. Everything that's living or non-living has a whakapapa. It has an energy just like we do. And it's remembering those things. It's not just the tree, it has a function. It creates so many different things on so many different levels. As a kai source for the manu, as a kai source for the insects, as a kai source for our nākau. When we go out there and we see it in flower and you see, like I think about the rata vine, and it's got this dainty little pūtakawa flower, but it's white, but on a miniature scale, that just, I don't know, it excites me. We've got so in tune with all other things in this modern world that we've forgotten those basic relationship that we have with the whenua. We came from papa and we will return to you. So for me, it's about those interwoven relationships that we have and that we've always had.
What I would like for my own grandchildren is for them to become creative, critical thinkers. And by doing that, I know that they can't go into a mainstream model philosophy. It doesn't fit that. It doesn't allow for that. It only allows a small percentage of that. I want something different for them. I want them, even our kura kaupapa movement, although that's done heaps for us, and I'm grateful for it, we're still assessing against the mainstream model. We're still having to tick those boxes, we're still focused on credits. attaining credits, and I just feel like, if we could just get rid of the uniforms, get rid of the ministry, and then just become a part of this, of who we were, I suppose, just reclaiming, because we knew how to do it, and early on with Kura Kaupapa, that was the buzz. You go, we learn maths by going outside and putting in a garden. And so Te karakia te rangi tūraua was karakia that we were taught. All those whiti became a sequential process in basically everything we did. Without us realising, that framework was ingrained, it was instilled into us, and then we started to then use that in our own practice. It's about Māori frameworks, really, Indigenous frameworks that we know, we just have to rediscover and reclaim, and shifting out of that mainstream colonial space and taking your role really not as a chalk and talk teacher, but as a co-creator of knowledge with your students, which is the basis of my PhD. So it's called He Kumara Awau, and that's a reference to kahukura and Te karakia te rangi tūraua. So kahukura was said to have come here on a rainbow. Each of those verses is an inquiry, I suppose. If you want to look at inquiry learning, it's a stage of the journey. And so within each stage, there's all these different inquiry kaupapa, So you don't leave things that you want nurtured in dark, shady places, or places that are not going to feed that or nurture it. And that's the dream, eh? You send your Tawera out into the world to be qualified and come back, to share the knowledge with their own.
So we have, for the last 4 years now, have been charged, I guess, with taking charge of our whenua. And this is sort of situated up in Kaitiha, and we have had that whenua forever, it seems, but have really had little to do with it except pay the rates. And that's been a lifelong kind of thing that has to happen with that whenua, only because we haven't been able to get access to it. In the last 4 years, though, we've had a lot to do with government agencies in terms of the cycleway that's come across through Gisborne, and having to form a trust to then work with NZTA to negotiate with this driver. So this is kind of how we've arrived at knowing our whenua a little bit more, and my darling uncle selected me, and I don't know why he did that, but I'm really grateful that he did, because I have a huge relationship with our whenua now that I never had, and that's really dear to me now. So we feel like we are now bringing our whakapapa back, we're bringing our whānau back together with this one piece of land that, and it's not a big, huge piece of land up there, but it's ours. And, well, not ours, it's ours to look after and to hand on down. We've learned so much about the whenua, about what it was used for, what our parents, their parents used to do when they could access it up there. And we've appreciated that it's a little bit more than just pay the rates. There's a lot more to it than that, and how it is tying us as a whānau together. But for me, it's a little bit bigger than that. It's not only is it tying us together, but it's tying us back to the community and back to Gisborne and back to Manatuki where we are, and back to Kaiti and back together.
While I was in the army, I was at the Gisborne office here, and I walked in and my boss said to me, he says, "You better put your other hat on, you gotta go to the meetings up in the club." I said, "What's that for?" He said, "It's about your fellas' land. They're looking for the native owners." And he emphasised that native. And I said, "Why am I have to go to it?" He said, "Because it's about your land. They're talking about selling it. And this is the land that these ones are looking after now at Kaiti." Well, it was not so much that bit of land, but it was for the rifle range. And my mum and my uncle, they were owners in it, and was taken off them by the Defence Department to be used to prepare for war. But when I heard about this rifle range, that they were trying to sell it, and I put in a complaint about it, I really opposed it. I said, "How dare they go and try and sell this without letting my parents know?" And I still look at that today and say, no, you can't let them just push you aside and give you rubbish.
The access way that we've been trying to gain has been problematic, but we are looking at solutions on other ways to access that, and as my koro mentioned, the rifle range is an option that we could seek in the future. So I think the journey in itself of regaining just access to our whenua, I think has come in huge steps and milestones in the last few years with our current trustees. And I guess as the next generation, and even, you know, my children as the future generation, I think it's so important that we remember that's who we're doing it for. And I think that was a big pinnacle movement for my elders in, you know, a respectful manner, that they may not get it, we may not even get it, but our children's children may get that access. And I think that's what we've always tried to remember as a whānau, is that the journey may be long, but it's not impossible. So I think for me, it's a really great understanding and being a part of so many whānau that actually have the history and wisdom to portray their stories in a way that we understand in regards to the context of actually having that relationship with our whakapapa, our whānau and our whenua.
Ka kia rua tapu ue nuku ki te tama mea mea ka tahuri te huri pūrei a ka whakapapa tama ia ka parere i ko ana te kakau o te hoi ko manini tua ko manini aro ka tangi te kura ka tangi wiwini ka tangi te kura ka tangi wawana.
I don't want our people to feel like they are less than the rangatira that they are. If I was to draw that down specifically to my family, to my hapu, to my circle of influence, I have vowed to the gods that my people will never ever feel less than the rangatira that they are, that they will never feel what that poverty feels like. And not poverty in money sense, but poverty in terms of wealth, of language, of culture, and all those type of things. And again, being brought up here in Blenheim, and even from other Māori, you know, we would
quite often get remarks that we were South Island Māori, that we did, we don't speak te reo and all those type of things. And if I was to think about the young Kiley Nepia that grew up here in Blenheim and Marlborough, one of the most bullied, white privileged places you could be brought up in, I actually didn't feel abundance. I came from a position of poverty, not internally, but something that was continually oppressed upon me. And it was almost that I was living in a dual world, because at school, I knew that I didn't fit in, that I was Pohatu, that I was Māori. But then what we were doing up here at the marae in terms of revitalising our language, our culture, building the first whare nui here in Te Tauihu, you can't help but come from a place of abundance, eh? And even if I was to look at this place here, it was a wasteland turned into fertile ground where seeds were planted and where abundance was the option. And now I guess I've moved into the position on how to teach the next generation how to be navigators, how to transform their families. And for me, it's the absolute belief in Te Ao Māori, in our cultural narratives, as a approach to life, as a way that we can apply them in modern day settings, and as a medicine for our people, as a way to heal ourselves, a way to connect us back to our whenua, a way to connect us back to Te Ao Māori. With the wānanga that I hold here, it really is instilling into our rangatei that your superpowers is your Māoridom, your Māoritanga, your Rongowhakaata. It's not the deficit, it's your superpower. And once you can connect to that through learning where you come from, learning your cultural narratives, helping out at the marae and all those type of things, then you are able to then share that abundance with other people.
We used to visit home throughout our childhood, but it used to always be strange because you didn't know anyone. Everyone knew who you were, but only you as a kid. They didn't know you as a person. Like, I felt like, oh, this is where my parents grew up, but it wasn't necessarily where I felt like I belonged, because everything I knew was in the South Island. My parents actually split up. So my father went back to Gisborne. So I think it was 2009, Christmas, I'd come back and I'd gone to Manatukia, and I was like, oh, this is a quiet place. I'd be sleeping and I'd wake up to Te Manua Mauria having their practice, and I was like, wow, this is cool. Well, it was a foreign thing for me because I'd go on for hours on like a Sunday. For me, that was really cool. It was like something that you didn't have down in the South Island. You don't get woken up by songs, and that just doesn't happen. So I started to like really enjoy like little things like that about returning home. And then I was living in Christchurch, so after the big Christchurch earthquake had hit, that's when I just started to think, what am I doing here? So that's when I was like, oh, I think I might go home. And I didn't know that I was from Manatukia. I didn't know where my grandmother laid. I didn't know a lot of this stuff. So as an adult coming back, it was just little things like that. Going to the Anzac service at the Māori Battalion, like that was, for me, that was awesome, because there's no marae down in the South Island. Well, there is a marae, but it wasn't something that I would go visit, where if I was just cruising around Manatukia, I'd go to the shop, walk across the bridge over to Ohako and just spend some time there, pick out all the weeds, on my way. Like those were experiences that, I couldn't have growing up. And then I started working on Ward 5 at Gisborne Hospital. I started seeing people who were like me and, had mannerisms like me that I didn't understand where they came from, and just felt better as a person. Like my wairua, everything was replenished. Like I felt a little bit stronger myself. I just started to realise that, wow, this is where I'm from. These are my people, like, I don't know, you just can't get a bit comfortable in yourself,
O makari ana ke mahu e atu I waho I toka ahuru ko te peka I rere mai ki utara hei kura mo ngā haki ko mama mo te o ko ue ka ahuru ko te ko iwi ko rongora hua.
When we were doing the Treaty of Waitangi negotiations, the settlement process, we had very little resources. We came together as tūranga iwi, but in coming together, it sort of separated us in a way as well. So, because we were all individually being put up by our iwi to participate in this process, so we were all individually nominated, so to speak, which sort of pitted us against each other rather than us coming together in a place where we could have really pushed to probably get even more say of the whole. We were basically told this is how much you're going to be getting, and pretty much, work together to find and agree to what you're going to get. I actually stepped aside from the process right near the end because the final allocation decision by the minister, I felt alienated some of the whenua. So I fronted up to our iwi to say that I needed to step aside and resign for those reasons. And it's interesting that we're sitting here right now, because one of the reasons why I stepped aside was the fact that we never dealt with kaiti. Our connection is not just our whakapapa to this place, but actually that shared whakapapa that we have between Ngai Tāwhiri and whānau iwi, which I didn't actually understand at the time I was in the negotiation process, that if I had of, maybe I would have even been a little bit more open to some of the decisions that had been made. Like I remember just standing up, and I'm always, real staunch, Rongowhakaata, but now I understand how it's not just Rongowhakaata here and Mahaki over here, we're actually the same people. I have a real hope, if we go along this line of remembering and understanding who we really are as a people of tūranga, as Rongowhakaata, as Ngāti Maru, as Ngai Tāwhiri, as whānau iwi. There are a whole lot of things that keep happening that we now have to, if we understand our connection to that, we can speak in those forums, individually, as a collective, and talk about, well, actually, this is how it really is, because we know that connection, we know the stories. That's actually where our strength lies.
Waiho tiki ake ki te kumara hiarangi o pete hawani ka noho iare ua poruhi te rangi ka tau kei raro te mahuru tiko tiko I ere.
I feel we're on the brink of a huge crisis, identity crisis. And anything I can do to help part of that antidote Yes, we've been through the pain and the loss, but we need to move on. So I designed the Māori alphabet to bring this knowledge to my people. And if I can bring my Māori alphabet to assist my people, I will. You have the concept of te kaua I runga, the celestial, and the kaua I raro, the terrestrial. And stars, comets play a huge part in our lives, influences us. And part of the alphabet is going to teach that. I've replaced the letter T, for example. And the letter T is the symbol for Matahi. So when you write the letter T, you're connecting yourself to the star constellation called Matahi. And if you know that the main navigational star that we use to sail to Aotearoa is Matahi. Matahi centers you on how to navigate your way to Aotearoa. So that's what I've done, how I've done the connection. When you throw the European symbol out, the European influence on our culture, throw that out, put Matahi T in its place. I'm sure it will work. Matariki and He Mātaua Maui are connected. When early October, the hook of Maui does not dominate the sky. It's in its last phase. And that's when Rehua is the top arc of the hook of Maui. And I used to go out to Te Whero and observe that. It used to fascinate me. So we know Rehua is the star of this great ancestor which we're connected to called Pūhaurangi. And Pūhaurangi came to Earth on a comet called Matakokiri. And when you see that star, you know that star is going to give planting abundance. Because around that time in October, we start planting our kumara when you see Rehua. But not only because of that, because of the connection to us. But what's fascinating, the hook of Maui comes like that and then arcs down like that to expose Rehua. And when Rehua is going down, Matari'i Nia or Matariki I Runga is coming up here. That's when you sail. So all those elements help revive who we are and what we are and where we come from.
Ko Pohatu te rangi te Matahi o te tau, te Pūtunga O Te Hinu e Tawera.
What I'm really appreciating about this project and this work, and especially around Pōpō, that sort of talks about te mātahi o te tau, I'm thinking about the action of transforming pūtake o te riri to te Pūtunga O Te Hinu, transforming our stories that tell us we're poor, that tell us that we don't have anything, into remembering what we do have. Now's the time. Now's the time for us to remember our abundance, and that's what I think the beauty of this project has been. We've been able to glimpse into our uri across the landscape of Rongowhakaata and beyond Rongowhakaata, the idea of Rongowhakaata, and to see them working in ways that are bountiful and that are abundant. Discoveries that our people have been making around their identity in a world that keeps telling them they're poor. You know, and I think about Hene Hakirirangi and the planting of the kumara up in Manawaru, and what that has meant for us as an iwi. reminding us about the care it takes, the gumption it took, the instinct it took, the context it took to produce this kumara to whāngai people. That's the way in which we've got to treat ourselves and our stories. Our people are thirsty and they're hungry, and we've got the means to feed them. So we've got to keep telling ourselves and reminding ourselves about how to do that.
Mama mo te o ko we ka
ke ki te kumara hiarangi o peke hawani ka noho ia re ua poruhi te rangi ka tau kei raro te ngahuru tiko tiko i ere o Pohatu te rangi te Matahi o